Hey everyone, and welcome to the Level Design Lobby. You're joining me, your host, Max Pears, and I am joined by two amazing and very funny people here from the GameDev.tv, and that here is Samuel and also Rick. So welcome guys to the show.
Hello, good to be with you. Funny, I'd like to be introduced as funny looking maybe.
I didn't want to say it because they can't see you, but you know my eyes have seen you, so I can confirm that, you know. But thank you guys very much for joining me here, and it's cool to have you. So for those, as I've just mentioned, that you guys are from the GameDev.tv, can you explain like what that is for people who may not know?
Yeah, sure. So GameDev.tv is basically a collection of instructors, and we get together and we make awesome tutorials on game development, and we release those on a site called udemy.com. So we do everything from beginner to kind of intermediate level game development and game design and other courses around game development, including artwork stuff and so on and so forth. So I'm Sam, by the way, just so you know whose voice is talking. Anything else to add to that, Rick?
You're the more intelligent sounding one. I'm the more funny sounding one.
Funny
Australians
one.
are funny. Australians are either funny or drunk. That's what Australians usually are.
No pressure you have to live up to now, though, by saying that.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I'm not drunk for a change. Yeah. But we for our stuff, for our courses, we try to teach people right from the very start. So people are interested in making games, maybe a little bit intimidated. Where do I start? What do I do? How do I go about doing this? We recommend jumping straight into an engine. So I specialize in teaching Unity courses, as well as other things like how to get a job and motivation type stuff. And Sam, you do a bit of everything,
I'm a bit
don't you?
many hats, but I tend to focus on programming. So I'm going to be a bit of a fly on the wall for the level design stuff, but I'm more programming related. But I've done Unreal, I've done Unity into quite some depth.
Awesome. So like, how did this all come about? As you said, there's many instructors, and how did it all come about for you two? How did you guys get involved?
Yeah, we got roped in by a chap called Ben Tristan, basically. It's all his fault. He started it all off originally, and as I think originally reached out to me at some point, quite a few years ago now, asking me to make a VR course, and then reached out to Rick because our community was raving about the awesome stuff he was doing on YouTube. Maybe you can talk more about your perspective on that one.
How I tricked them into thinking I was awesome. Yeah. You know what? I love YouTube. Max, do you have a YouTube channel? Do you do YouTube stuff?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do, man.
I love it. I love the feedback you get. When you do something on YouTube, straight away I get 10 people who are like, that's awesome, thanks Rick, you really brightened my day. And then you get the one person who's like, you're an idiot, Rick, that's completely wrong, you stole this from some other place. And I love the 10 because it really gives me a pep in my step. And then I love the 1 because there's always a little bit of truth in it. That's what I've learnt so much. I've got a little bit sad, haven't quite shed a tear, but I think, I don't know about you, Max, but you know, when you get someone on YouTube who says something that's a little bit too close to the truth, you know, you suck, I do, then there's such a massive learning in it. That really helps me improve.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think it's an interesting one as well because sometimes you have to break it down as well, you know, because not everyone's great at giving constructive feedback. As you're saying, when someone's like, you suck, you're like, okay, but do I? But like, why did it suck? You know, like, how did it?
Please elaborate.
Yeah, exactly. Can you explain this why? Mainly to my parents, you know, so they can understand where they went wrong. But it's I think it's always interesting to hear that and then I don't know if you've gotten into it before, but I've had it where, especially on Twitter, where I'm trying to have a debate, and I do mean just an actual debate, not going at anyone. But like, it's amazing how quickly people can turn that switch up to suddenly, you know, making it. And it's an interesting one. But yeah, I think there's always a lot to learn from people, whether it be positive comments. I mean, who doesn't love that boost of endorphin? But yeah.
And it's part of, like, I know you talk a ton about design, game design, level design, and I think that's part of the process as well, is that when you're creating something, particularly when you're starting out, if you're working on a little indie game or you're working on your portfolio to get a job, I think it's easy to be fragile. Like in my very, very early days, I was a little bit fragile, and I really longed for the people who said, this is amazing. I'm like, thank goodness, yeah, I think I might be amazing. And then you get the one person who's like, it doesn't make sense. You're like, oh. Yeah. And I think it's that hardiness of just listening to what people have to say. This level was too hard. This didn't make sense. I didn't know where to go. You should do it more like Naughty Dog games, or whatever.
Everyone gets that one, yes.
This is not Witcher 3. Can you please make it more Witcher-like? So I think it's when you expect it, and when you're ready for it, and when you listen to it. This is the main thing. Often we say, just push it to a side, just don't listen to the haters. But one of the main things that I like to get across to people is listen to the haters, don't take it personally, but there's so much good value in there because they're just being honest with, hey, I'm your end user and this particular thing sucked. Can you make it less suck?
Yeah.
I think that's... Sorry, you go on, Sam.
It's really hard to get to get your mind to ignore negative feedback. Like if somebody says you suck and you just go, I'm just going to ignore that. It's still going to niggle at you, right? Yes. But if you can like deconstruct that or get to the bottom of what they're actually saying, it's like they've ineloquently said that my game could use improving in this and such a way, right? You can actually, I think that really disarms it a lot more. We get a lot of negative reviews on our courses as well. There's like plenty of good reviews, but lots of negative ones, and they always hurt a little bit. So you have to like decompress them and go like, okay, defuse your anger and figure out what actually you're trying to say.
And write the reply and then sit on it overnight.
That is I think if you are going to respond, do wait a few hours. Even I wouldn't encourage it, but unless you feel there's something to actually say, in terms of maybe they've suggested on like a level, for example, I don't think this is a good idea, and then you can maybe go, okay, but this is why I believe it is. Here's X, Y, and Z for it. But I think one of the big things with this is like your game, and this is just the reality, whether it be game, level, mechanic, any of that art, they're only going to get better by someone being honest and giving you that negative feedback, because that's how you learn. When hopefully it's not someone swearing at you and calling you horrible names, but when you get feedback that like, okay, do try this, then things will improve because of that.
One really frustrating feedback that I've had in my career, because I've been a level designer at times in my career and a game designer, the feedback where it's something that you can't do anything about it, that's the feedback I find very frustrating. Like, I didn't know what to do in this level. This level sucked because the character animation looked bad. It's like, don't say the level sucked because I can't do anything about the character animation. And I think that's the plight of a lot of indie developers, particularly solo indie developers, where they've got good ideas and they've got some good execution, but for example, their art skills aren't up to it and they don't have a budget for assets. So their game kind of looks a little bit cruddy. And people can't see past that to find the joy in the game and find the excitement. And I think that's one of the cool challenges about being indie. If you don't have a particular skill set, how do you still make something awesome and get around that? So, the classic example is Notch. I don't think he was the best artist in the world, but he made a game that some of you may know as Minecraft that ended up being spectacular despite the art, and the art actually became a selling point. So I think it's play to your strengths and then do something quirky and weird and interesting with your weaknesses, rather than trying to, take 2 years of learning how to make 3D models so that you can make your art sort of okay.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and I think that's a positive one. Because another example was a game called like Thomas Was Alone.
Oh yeah.
Basically, you just cubes, and that was fantastic as well, because that the cubes just had character, and to say that they were essentially programmer art, and I don't mean that as an insult, it was fantastic, and so I think that's what game development is, though, is like there are a lot of challenges and a lot of constricting factors. It's like, how do you actually make something within those factors, And I guess one of my questions for you guys then with it is, so you're doing, your courses and that, like, they're slightly different to, and how you produce things, because you're producing stuff for people to learn from. Like, when you're making these videos, how do you go about like thinking about how the user, like how to teach? Because sometimes that's the hardest thing, is making sure that it's understandable from many different levels.
My approach is generally to get Rick to watch it, and then if he understands it, it's golden.
Definitely from a programming level. I represent the beginner to intermediate programmer, and Sam represents the intermediate to advanced. So he'll work his magic, and I'll look at it and be like, I don't know how to do this, man. So then, from the point of view of, are we doing something that's too difficult? And then, likewise, the other way around, if we're doing something where we need to explain it to beginners, we need to make sure that it's not too, or to the people who maybe aren't beginners, it's not too dumbed down. So there's a real dance to the delivery at the level, and we get a lot of people saying this is too slow or this is too fast, so we have to find the midpoint. But one of the big challenges we have, and Sam and I are working on an RPG at the moment, we've been working on for a long time, and we teach it as a course, and we're in the process of updating that course and making it better, and we're using Unity, so putting it into Unity 2018 just as Unity 2019 comes out. Thank you, Unity. That's our life. But one of the challenges is, if we were just to make this game, we would have pumped it out ages ago and just kind of done it however it worked, and used asset store assets that we could, we don't have to worry about any licensing, and we don't have to worry about readability. It's just he and I getting a game done. So there's a real extra layer when we have to think about what makes for a good game, and what makes for a good learning journey, and what is understandable for people who are a little bit more beginnery, and what's not too slow and boring for people who are more advanced. So there's a lot that goes into it. And probably our 6 months of development turns into 2 years of course creation.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been a long journey so far, and I think that's part of it. Is just we've done a false run at it in the first place, and we've had to redo this first part of the course, like to integrate all the learnings from the first time around. So it's definitely not been easy at all, because usually our teaching is centered around small projects. And this is absolutely a colossal project, and everything's got an opportunity to trip you up.
And that's part of the joy of it, because I know when I was getting into game development, if I could sit down and see from start to finish an entire project with all of the bumps along the road, it would have made a massive difference. I was just sort of guessing at things that were going on. I knew little bits and pieces here and there. And I know if people out there watching YouTube videos, which are awesome, big shout out to Brackies. He's in the Unity area and he does such a spectacular job. But it's difficult in that medium for people to get the holistic view on a project and go through 20 or 30 or 50 hours of the flow to see when you're at 30 hours into your project, oh no, that thing that I did 20 hours ago, there has been such a flow-on effect from that. I didn't even think about that. So that when you get in a studio, you know these things, and you can sit there with confidence and say, well, as a matter of fact, if we do that in 20 hours' time, everyone's going to be swearing at their screens.
Yeah. No, I think that's an interesting one as well, because it is that people don't understand how, like I said, how there's big knock-on effects, or you might do something to find out it actually didn't have that desired intent in the end. It didn't give you the result that you wanted, and so you have to be like, right, is it worth keeping, or do things need to change, or does it not fit within the scope of the game or the actual vision? And I think that's part of development as well, and people, I think there's always an interesting one where, especially when you're planning your game out, you're like, okay, well, this I imagine works like this, and this will go like that. And then when you finally get it into game, like you could put your hands on the controller and test it, it just actually doesn't work. And I think that's always the interesting thing that people aren't aware of. And it's okay for that. Like, it genuinely is okay for that one. But what made you choose an RPG then? Because that's quite a ambitious, genre of game.
It's our students' fault.
Straight away.
They really wanted to do an RPG, and we did a Kickstarter more fool us. And no, it's awesome, because it is a fantastic game in terms of how many different systems have to come into play and work and cooperate together. You've got questing systems, you've got dialogue systems, you've got all your movement and combat, and all this stuff has to integrate So it's about the most complex project you could try and do without, unless it was a multiplayer RPG, which some people do ask us for, and we say no. It's complicated enough as it is. But it does, it's really good for giving that expertise in terms of all the moving parts and components working together and having to make quite a holistic, game design as well. I think with so many features to twiddle.
Love games? Love game design? We do too. So why not help us here at Level Design Lobby spread the word? With Patreon, from as little as $1 per month, you can do just that. And new for 2019, we have more reward tiers and even more awesome perks on offer, such as access to our community Discord, level design weekends, exclusive talks by professional designers, one-on-one sessions, and much more. Sound interesting? Then head on over to patreon.com/level design lobby for more information and to pledge your support today. As always, we'd like to say a massive thank you to all the game gurus who've backed us so far. It's thanks to your generous support that we can continue to grow, pursue new opportunities, and bring you new, awesome, and exciting content. So thank you. And now back to our regularly scheduled program.
It's interesting with the game design and the level design is that we've got a big game design document, mostly because we have a lot of our students say, how do you write a game design document? And I've worked in studios where we had a publisher that was responsible for paying the money. And so the publisher's putting in whatever, X millions of dollars, and they'll say to us as a team, okay, before you build this, we need some big document so that we know that you know what you're doing. And the true designer in me, particularly the indie designer, but the true designer says, that's the wrong way to make a game. Like, don't design it all out first. Don't spec out a 200-page GDD and then try to build to that, because it's not going to work. It's unless you're doing something that's just a sequel, or you already know all of the mechanics and you're just sort of updating the narrative, perhaps. I don't think it makes for a very good game at all. For me, the philosophy is sit down with a small team, just throw things into a prototype, brainstorm it, do a whole lot of what ifs, and then quickly iterate on that and get to the point where you've got a really ugly, kind of bandaged together prototype that has some nugget of awesomeness in it, and then you say, right, how do we polish this up and how do we turn it into a full production game? So in our RPG course, we've got the GDD and we've got tons of stuff in it, but that's not how we don't look at it. And I think, I don't know about you on your team, Max, but I find that GDDs might be one person on the team that really needs it. There might be one programmer who's like, I really need a GDD for this particular section. But aside from that, it's just for the higher-ups, the producers and the executives, to feel connected to what's actually going on without getting in there and kind of poking around and saying, can you tell me what are you doing today? So,
yeah. It's a tough one with documentation, because I agree, like, some points, it's like, that's not needed. However, like, I'm not saying with GDD, but like other documents I feel are needed to help in terms of things such as trying to understand things like metrics for your level design, so you've got that to work from. Other things like that I think is useful. And as you're saying though, I do agree, be careful with what you write on your GDD, because it can restrict you. And also, as we just mentioned earlier, things are likely to change, and that's just part of it. People do wonder from a production side, why do things get changed so quickly? It's because no matter how much planning you do, things are going to change. Things aren't going to feel right, as I said before. That you've got to adapt on the fly, and that's why I think prototyping, as you're saying, is also a super important phase. When you executives, you're asking someone to fund or look at your game, don't hand them that GDD, because it's a lot to read and it's not as interesting as playing something. So I think there's things to take away with that, But also the problem is, and I don't know how you guys have found it, with smaller studios, but when I was indie at a time and working on mobile games, it's so easy for communication to fall apart and documents to get out of date. And it's a real shame, because some of that is needed, as I'm saying, but you've got to make sure, though, as long as communication's working, that's the most important thing for sure, in my opinion, when working for that.
Yeah. I think if you've got a really strong core to your game. People sometimes call it the vision, they sometimes call it the experience, or the design pillars. I like to think of it as the player experience. And for me, the best games out there have super consistency throughout that experience. And there's clearly someone on the team who is responsible for saying, this is how it has to go down. Our game needs to be dark and moody. And if I see anything trying to get into our game that's not dark and moody, bam, it's going to be cut out of there. So, it's something that we often... I think it's a really big skill, and it's a really tough skill to master, figuring out a player experience and then owning it. But early on, you've got to just nail that down, and it doesn't matter what it is. It can be frantic, it can be slow and strategic, it can be quirky. It really doesn't matter. Gamers will tolerate any sort of experience so long as it is a deep, rich experience pointing in that direction.
Yeah. No, I agree with that one. I think, as you called it then, like the design pillars, that's something that I always stress to people, is make sure with your vision that you have that. So that way you and your team knows, as you're saying, if you're going moody, dark, and I don't know, something like gory, they understand that right off the bat. So that way they can always refer to it, so everyone is roughly on that same vision. And there was a really interesting interview I listened to with his name was Patrick O'Keefe. He was the art director on Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which was, and one of the things that he said, as he's saying with it being a skill, is he said that the hardest thing he found when talking to the directors, when he was showing people's work, and that is like, they were cutting it, and it wasn't because they were like, oh, this is bad. They're like, this area is cool. But like, half the job of the director is defending their vision. It's awesome, it's beautiful, but it doesn't fit in that vision. And I think that is the beginning of it, is making sure you got that tight vision and you just keep it there. Even if an idea sounds good, you got to keep it in that vision, because I just completely agree with that one. And with the fact it's an RPG, then I was going to ask, are you two big RPG fans?
No, I couldn't say I'm a massive RPG fan.
That's what I'm going to see, the tough part of it, in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, no, I do enjoy RPGs though. I played and enjoyed them. I can't say like I'm a massive RPG nut. But I've there's some that I do enjoy. I particularly really enjoyed actually the one that you put me onto, Rick, which is Battleheart Legacy, which is just a super simple, stripped down mobile RPG, but it doesn't have too much stuff going on in there. It's not a like bells and whistles RPG, but it's got the core really nailed down, that whole progression aspect and trying to get better to deal with different levels of monsters, and it just does that really well. And I got pretty addicted to that one, so I can I think that's and also, like, as a kid I played RuneScape incessantly.
RuneScape.
The cool thing about RPGs is that it's so diverse. It's a really diverse genre. There's like a lot of what we've modeled our particular game after that we're making is a Diablo style fixed camera point and click type RPG, but compare that to more of the Witcher type RPG, or Fallout, or Skyrim, or even to a massive MMO like a Warcraft. It's so diverse. Even a game like Undertale is an RPG.
Oh, fantastic example, yeah.
So for me, I love having a character that has some sort of objective, some sort of goal and stats, so I can have my character become more powerful. And I think that's the foundation of an RPG, foundation of many games. But a lot of games don't require you to have that character progression, but I think RPGs inherently do. So I love it, and I love how diverse it is. It's so cool.
Yeah, I think it's amazing, like, when you're thinking about that as well, and especially stuff as more games seem to be leaning into that genre now, like the change of Assassin's Creed, how that's got its whole RPG sort of style, and now, like, it's just interesting how they've evolved in different ways, like, on mobiles, in terms of their combat systems are so different to that of, say, something like an old school Final Fantasy, and I think that's an interesting one. And I guess what's been some of the big takeaways you guys have been learning as you've been making this RPG then?
Yeah, one of my big takeaways is to resist the temptation to do things out of order. And so if you've got any listeners at the moment who are working on their own game or aspiring to be, say, level designers or game designers, what you need to expect is that there'll be huge periods of time where you don't get to do any level design. So an example for me, way back when I was working at Next Level Games and we were working on a Captain America game, and at that time there was a writer's strike in Hollywood, which meant that all of the Hollywood stuff got put on hold, so therefore our game got put on hold. So there was a time where we were sort of working on it and sort of not working on it, and I was trying to do level design type stuff, but we didn't have mechanics for it, and it wasn't progressing, and mostly we didn't know what the story was going to be because we were waiting on the movie and waiting on Hollywood. So it's really difficult to make game mechanics when you don't know what the world is and what the kind of the overarching story is, and it's super difficult to make levels when you don't have the gameplay fleshed out. So one of the things that Sam and I have been talking about recently is I was eager to get in there and let's do some story, let's talk about characters and narrative, and let's make some levels and put in some content, but our player still isn't able to shoot its bow and arrow. So I'm like, that's got to come first. Like, you've got to do that. You've got to do the first things first and not scratch that designer itch if it's not the right time.
Yeah. And what's really interesting for me is to see how much it's an integrated experience in an RPG, because with so many games, it's kind of like, hey, this first level kind of introduces you to this mechanic, then the second level introduces you to a new mechanic, and it gets more and more complicated from there. But with an RPG, it's almost instantly you kind of chat to somebody, so there's dialogue, then you've been given a quest, which is to level up and kill this guy. You know, you've already got all these different mechanics in play, but like within the first few seconds of your game.
Yeah, you got seven systems before you can just walk down the street, don't you? Yeah.
I think that's also one of the challenging parts of RPGs is how do you teach the player without, throwing them a novel to read, like this, I see a lot of that in RPGs is the amount of text, because they have to teach, as you said, so many systems. I think that's always an interesting one with how to teach in an RPG.
There's a lot of newer, younger level designers out there. I think game designers in general that think that narrative is more important than it actually is. So there's a game that I love so much from a narrative point of view, and there's no dialogue in it. It's called Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons.
Oh, yeah.
But right at the start, it's just you get a 30-second or 60-second cutscene of the little boy and his mother. If I remember correctly, the mother's drowning and the little boy couldn't quite save her. Boom! Just the emotion in there is incredible. You don't need more than that. You don't need to know that the mother came from a long heritage of sailors' wives and that the little boy once had a friend called Wiggles. Like, none of that stuff matters in the to the player. And there's so many designers out there, like new designers, I think, learning that part of the process, that they've got this huge world in their head, particularly RPG designers, huge world and about the princess and the backstory and the villains, and there's 7 different factions and stuff, and there's just no time to communicate that to the player. And if you try to do that in the first 10 minutes, you're trying to give all that backstory, then there's no game, there's no immersion. It kind of falls flat. So anyone out there who wants to know how to give people instant immersion without overwhelming them with story, go check out Brothers, because just instantly it's just, okay, it's loss, it's family, it's objective, boom, go. Love it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that one. It's one of my, especially their control system, and I don't want to give too much away, despite the game being X years old. But what they do with that control system to tie in with the narrative is fantastic. Really good. And I think another good example of that is also Journey. I love Journey and how that is just, you kind of just stand up, you see the big mountain, and that's just kind of the end of it. You'll see some other little narrative beats in terms of graffiti and not graffiti, but
symbols,
things on walls, symbols. Thank you, sir. With that, and I think that helps build the narrative. But yeah, I think it's amazing what you can do, and also the fact is, games are games; they're interactive. The narrative needs to be interacted with on some level, compared to having to sit there and hear the story or read the story. So yeah, I agree, mate.
It's the same in games as it is in movies, and probably novels and everything, really. It's show them, don't tell them. And so if anyone out there who's on their design journey and figuring these things out, think about how you can show them rather than tell them. Now, there's a challenge. It's like, but I'm not an artist. and I can write a whole bunch of words that will come on screen. I've got the skill set to do that, and I've got the tools to do that, so that's what I will do. On the screen will be, once upon a time in ancient whatever, like I can do that, but how do I do the other bit? I think it's as simple as showing an image to give the mood for your player experience. If you look at, this is a really weird example, but if you look at Angry Birds, when you start that game, there's a bird with an angry look on his face, and there's some pigs looking like douchebags. It's like, got it. It's a single image, and the camera just scrolls. Like any designer can figure out how to make a camera scroll on a single image, just scrolls from left to right. Angry bird, and there's the pigs, and they've got some eggs. And I think if you're a designer with not a lot of tools at your disposal or not a lot of budget, use that as inspiration and challenge yourself. How can I do something that's cool with minimal art content or certainly minimal dialogue and characters blabbering on about stuff?
No, I think there's some really cool stuff with that. I'm sorry, Sam, you go.
Yeah, I was just going to add that on the RPG theme, in terms of story, I've read a good article, I can't remember where now, so it's very useless.
Just making this up, aren't you?
I'm just saying that I read it somewhere.
You heard this on Oprah, didn't you?
Yeah, exactly, it was Oprah. No, so the point being made by this designer was that don't try and give people story up front. If you're going to have any story, very much like Rick said, make it integral. And he gave a good example where, if you're going to a castle that's inhabited by like the 7th generation of this werewolf family, and they're impervious to these kinds of attacks, but not to these kinds of attacks, don't just like go and talk to a peasant and he like brain dumps this stuff on you when you're like, I couldn't give a shit what these werewolf family, like whatever. But make it part of a quest, so that you have to go and kill one of these werewolves, and you go and talk to this guy, and he's like, oh yeah, there's a big castle over there, and you're like, okay, I'm going to go and kill this werewolf, and then you can't do anything, and then you come back and talk to the peasant, and he's like, oh yeah, didn't I tell you that they're impervious to this because of something that happened when, in the 9th generation, whatever. And so they just kind of make it important to the player, because otherwise they're not going to care.
Yeah, man, and I think that also comes down to some design as well as like environmental storytelling. Like you mentioned, like 7th, 9th generation, but if you're walking through the halls of the castle, and then you have like pictures or tapestry of those werewolf princes or princesses down the wall, you can be like, oh, this was the family lineage. There's stuff that you can do again with show don't tell and these sort of things to help tie it into the world. So yeah, I completely agree with that made up designing document you read there, mate.
And it's a really common narrative mechanic nowadays. Like, it's pretty common nowadays, but I remember when I was playing BioShock 1 back in the day, it wasn't so common back then to give all the backstory as an option, as a choice to the player. So you'd pick up the little tape recorders, and if you wanted to know about all that stuff, then you could listen to it and hear the richness and the deepness and the personalities and stuff. For me, I'm a little bit more just get me to the shooting, so I wouldn't listen to it. But someone else is going to be more engaged in that interpersonal interaction, so they will go and listen to it. So I think, like I say, it's super common to do that nowadays, but not just for dialogue or for backstory, but how else can you give the player the option to pull on that? Yeah. So maybe, Sam, you're talking about the werewolves and the 7th generation. If it's critical that someone knows that because that's how they defeat the boss, then you have to give it to them. You have to make sure they consume it. But if it's just sort of supplementary, that it enhances the experience, then maybe there's another way for them to get it. Maybe they do have to chase down that peasant who does the brain dump, but they don't have to chase him down.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, no, I think that's a cool one. Like with the Witcher series, what I liked with that was they had the bestiary, where if you wanted to best prepare for like a werewolf or a different animal, then you could read through it, understand it, and then without right, I need to go get these ingredients to make this potion, or I can just come and attack it with my sword and magic and see what works. Yeah, So yeah, I think that was a good one there. And Rick, mate, because we're coming up to the closing time of it, I want to get on one last topic here. You said at the beginning that you help people figure out how to get into the industry, and I guess what are some of the biggest tips that you can give there, mate? Like, what is it that you commonly found or asked, or that you commonly see when people approach you about this subject?
I think the main thing is people think that it's all about what they've done that gets them a job. So what games have I made? What companies have I worked for? What's my, what school did I go to? But as an employer, and I've hired hundreds of people in the games industry, and I'm constantly, or I was constantly looking for what can you do? Not what have you done? And often the what have you done will give me hints about what can you do. But the what can you do, people can get that even if they haven't worked in a game studio. You can get that by looking at a particular studio. Say, I want to go work for CD Projekt Red. What sorts of games do they make? What is important for a level designer on those games? I'm going to go and create something that could fit within one of those games to show that I could do that. Another studio might make all their games using Unreal, and you say, okay, I'm going to go learn enough of Unreal so that I can place down some triggers and have some enemies attack, and then have a little bit of dialogue to show the flavor, and then I'm going to write a little map of here's what I'm going to do in my level, and then I'm going to execute that with a couple of caveats. This all looks ugly because I'm not an artist, and I'm going to actually show them the flow. Here's me thinking about it, here's me doing it. So prove that you can do it rather than just firing off a resume and saying, here it is. Because if you've got, say, 1 year experience in the games industry and someone else has got 5 years, you're going to lose. Or if you're just out of school and someone's already had a job, you're going to lose if you just go with this is what I've done. So you have to prove that you can do the fundamental thing that someone is hiring you to do. If they're hiring you to be a scripter, then you have to prove to them that you can do scripting. You can't just say, I went to school and I learnt programming. So you have to show. And this is another one of those show, don't tell. It all links together.
Yeah. No, man, I completely agree. I think it's a valid point, and the thing I like you said there was about studying the company. And that's sometimes I think people don't understand that. Like I had a task for the people who listen to this podcast that, because we do like level design weekend where I'll set them for a weekend. They might have to make like a level. The previous one was in the Deus Ex universe. So that means they have to research what's into Deus Ex, what goes into the level design. And we had some amazing people do some great stuff. And you could see that they, wrote things down in terms of this is what they think the levels do, and it was really cool. I think that's a big part of it, and a lot of people get put off right away because you're saying like, oh well, I haven't done anything, I've got nothing. A great exercise that I learnt about was that if you pick a game, for example, Last of Us, you've now got to make a mechanic in that universe. So you make a little mechanic doc, it's in that universe. You don't need to worry about having to pretext with this is my own fantasy world. People know it.
Yep.
And then you make the small prototype. It doesn't have to be pretty. And then you show that as well. And I found that people got a lot of interest and got to get better by doing that because they're working in a defined area and able to create something within a universe as well. So things like that, I agree with you, help.
And if someone wants to be a level designer or a game designer or just work in the industry, often what people think is I have to go and make my own game. Oh gosh, I'm not so good at whatever programming or art, but I have to go learn how to do programming and art so that I can prove that I'm a good level designer. So like, no. Go find a game that has a level editor and make levels in that game to prove what you know how to do. And if you don't know how to, like if in that level editor it touches on scripting and you've got no idea about scripting, go take a course. And that doesn't have to you don't have to go to a 4-year university to go do that. You come take one of our courses, get through it in a couple of weeks, and then boom, you've got this awesome knowledge about how to go about creating that.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's really cool, that stuff. It's really cool that you guys provide courses as well, because that's a big point you hit on. Don't just think that university is the only way. There's all these amazing stuff out there right now which you can take. In a couple of weeks you can have something and you can build upon that as well, and I think that's always a cool thing, that one there.
I think between us, Sam and I probably have like about 13 years of university education, but I think I would lean towards, I've got a couple of young kids, I'd be like, don't go to university, you don't need to. Like there's a whole lot of fluff that you have to pay for that takes a lot of time. What do you want to do? What are you passionate about? Just go and find exactly those skills. Don't do all the fluff. For any kids out there listening who are like, I think maybe I should go to school for 3 years and do a thing, don't do that. if you want to be a game developer, just learn game development. Don't learn all the other spudge that comes along with going off and doing a course.
Yeah.
So going off and doing a degree.
Yeah. No course is coming. Come to this one.
Yeah. What am I talking about? I don't know. I must be tired. I've got kids.
No, I think that's it. You know, there's so many resources out there right now that there's never been this amount of knowledge available for everyone before, and take advantage of it. Really do just take. In fact, there's free stuff, you know, even free stuff just to help you with the theory. And then you got, like, I see loads of people, like, you know, people like kids really young who are teaching, you know, when I'm stuck on Unity or something, that know something that I don't. I'm like, oh, cool. I'm glad they've just decided to share that so I can learn that stuff. So, yeah.
And be diverse as well. So I think relevant to level design is studying things like architecture, studying things like environment, going for a walk in the forest. Things like that, I think, really improve your level design skills, give you ideas, or else you're just doing it based upon what games you've played. That becomes your inspiration, and it gets very stale. So you have to go for a walk out on a rainy day, and you're like, my feet are really muddy, and it makes a really interesting sound. There's a mechanic. I have to escape these bandits that are listening out for me, but as I walk through the mud, splodge, 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 it makes noise, so I have to go and, you know, whatever, find a way to, and these are the ideas that come to you when you allow yourself to have a very diverse input, and don't just sit in front of your computer playing games all day, because in a way that can be a really bad education for becoming a great level designer, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that one. I think take inspiration from all your other hobbies. There's a lot, you know, for it. I always say with to like people just starting with level design, because a lot of people tend to just make box rooms and think that's how architecture works. But I always say, look in your room that you're in, there's going to be walls that are extruded. There's going to be, like, the windows here. There's going to be different pillars that pop out more than other things. It's never just a square box. Always just sit and look around you, because, as you said, mate, it's all around you, and it's all around you, you know. But, guys, we're going to wrap this one up, because it's been a good one here. I just want to say, so how do people reach you then? How do they get in contact if they want to know more about yourselves?
Yep. The main thing is just go to GameDevTV. So GameDev.TV. Say that one more time because I said it wrong each time. GameDev.TV, and you'll find all about what we're up to in our courses and stuff. If you search for Rick Davidson anywhere on Google, you'll find all my stuff, my YouTube channel and my LinkedIn profile. Please do connect with me. I love to hear from listeners and folks out there. And I'm sure if you search for Sam, the same thing.
Sam Patuzzi, which is P-A-T-T-U-Z-Z-I. I just always have to spell it out. There's not many of me of that name, so you do come up with my stuff, and you can reach out to me that way.
Said with such an elegant accent as well. It's like as though you're half Italian or something, Sam.
Yes, it's very much like that.
No, fantastic, guys. Thank you all very much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. It's been some good conversation, guys. This was awesome. So if you do want to reach out to me, though, you can do so on Twitter at MaxPairs, or do email your questions in leveldesignlobby@gmail.com. And if you want to support the podcast, then please head over to the patreon.com/leveldesignlobby, where you can join us for some amazing chats and more. Okay, everyone, I'll catch you all later, and see you next time.